Whoa, this is important. Whoa, highlight. Whoa, highlight. Whoa.
Oh, woo! Finally done, man. Oh, that was pretty long, man. But that book was so good, man. If that's you, you're in the right place. So I only needed to know the habit loop to understand the entire book. Oh, if that's what you want, you're also in the right place.
Now, before you ever start reading a book, you must always read the introduction first. And why? Because I came from a background of speed reading. I used to speed read a lot. I used to read like this. And it worked for a while, but I noticed that when I was speed reading, sure, I finished books in like 2-3 hours. But what did I get out of it? So, I'm gonna teach you a way that I learned from how to read a book. Very easily, you'll be able to read more while reading lesser. And so, almost every single book will definitely have an introduction. And in the introduction, they will tell you what chapter is what chapter. Which means, they'll tell you which chapter do you need and which chapter do you not need. When you read a book, you want it to change your life. You want it to improve your life. And so to do so, you must look at how the book is organized. For example, the book Principles tells you that part number 1 literally just tells you that it's his story. So you don't need to read it. Just read part 2 and part 3. Or if you just need the life principles, just take part 2. Most books will tell you how the books are organized, and you can just pick and choose which one do you need, and only read those that apply to your situation. Because some of them, for example, if you don't work as a job and there is like job sections, just skip that. You don't need that. So when you open a book, after you have read the introduction that this book is what you need right now, it's time to just start reading. And when you start reading, the only notes you'll be taking is just the idea name that is as short as possible with the page number. When you are reading, you will definitely be getting questions and ideas for other parts of your life. For example, you may be reading this book for a presentation and one sentence sparked an idea from you. You can then go ahead and write down bracket P bracket beside the page number and the idea name. And of course, this can be personalized to anything. After you have finished reading the first time, and all the notes will look something like this. Now it's time for you to filter all these notes. This is where the page number shines. You go back to the same page number and find out the idea you wrote and think logically. Do you really did this or not? For those that you don't, you'll be giving them a big X, and you basically do this for all the notes. You go back to all of them and think whether it belongs to the X or tick or the question mark. Those that are ticked will be elaborated further then, because those notes will be used very soon. And the question mark is when you don't understand this, no matter how many times you read it, or you just don't know whether to throw it or keep it. Now after you do all this, it's time to elaborate all the points. You give a concrete example so that you can understand the concepts deeper. And now for the theory points, you can put it into your second brain. However, unfortunately, I don't really know how to explain this, so I recommend using Notion or Obsidian as a great start on how to store your notes online. And I highly recommend Thomas Frank and Tiago Forte on this subject. And for the question marks, you can now put those into Obsidian or whatever software you're using as a future reference if you ever want to get back to it.
Now, the most important part is obviously how to implement the practical points. And so to implement the practical points, we must first find out how many types of practical knowledge is there. After reading a dozen books, I found out there was most commonly 3 types of practical knowledge, and I'll explain simply an overview of what they are, and I'll be giving examples of how to do so in a moment. So the first type is basically the habitualized practical knowledge. Habitualized practical knowledge is basically practical knowledge that you can just integrate into your life that you can just do once and kind of just forget about it, and it became a habit basically. And the second one I see quite commonly as well is called the procedural practical knowledge. Procedural practical knowledge is one I also frequently see a lot, but I always had trouble trying to use it and implement it because they're basically just step-by-step instructions to get a desired results. And to do so, for example, an ultra learning project kickoff. Before you start an ultra learning project, you need to do a step-by-step thing. You need to do the what, answer the what, the why, the how, benchmarking, all of this. But these are basically just proceduralized practical knowledge. And the last one is basically, I call it the experimental practical knowledge, which is practical knowledge that could be procedural and could be habitual. However, you're unsure whether or not you want to use it or not, because it's something that's like you want to try it out. I mean, you want to do it, but you're like, it takes too much work. But at the same time, you don't want to just throw it away. So it's something you're going to be experimenting in your days, and that's what experimental practical knowledge is. So to give an example of a habitualized practical knowledge is basically, for example, the deep work tracking. So to track deep work, I basically just started using a focus timer from TickTick, where I would just continuously use this, and it's what really integrated into my life. So I don't have to give a shit about it. So whenever I start work, okay, just put 30 minutes, 90 minutes, okay, let's just deep work. So that's basically just a habitualized practical knowledge. Also, to go more in depth into habitualized practical knowledge, I need to tell you guys that the backbone of habitualized practical knowledge is basically Atomic Habits habit loop. So to give an example, let's say that I wanted to habitualize Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law is basically just cutting down the time it takes to finish every task so that you do it in a more high intensity and you finish it much more faster. And I like that. So I wanted to habitualize it. So how do I habitualize this and forget about it? And so I did just put it in my next action list, because every day I'm always in my next action list looking at what task to finish today. And then I would just immediately be like, oh, I gotta do Parkinson's law. And I'll just do Parkinson's law on it. And there you go. It's integrated into my life. Also, I highly suggest that you can take your the habit loop and put it into your procedure booklet, which I'll be talking about later, so that whenever you want to build or break any habits, you can put that in, and you can just flip the procedure booklet, and there you go. You can use that as a basis to how to build or break any of the habits by just following according to the habit loop.
To implement procedure practical knowledge, I created this thing called the procedure booklet right here. The bullet journal talked about using an index, but I chose to rather use a table of contents and added these papers so that it made things very easy, and all it takes is literally one flip and I'm at the page. So let's say I want to implement something like starting an ultra learning project. So rather than having to go back to my summary page on Notion or reread the book again, I have one dedicated page for everything ultra learning reference. I have the 9 principles of ultra learning on the top section for me to just remember that I may be forgetting to do directed learning. And the project kickoff right below it is how I start every ultra learning project. The things below it are the strategies from ultra learning that I can use under the principles. When I have problems with retrieval, I can always refer back to the retrieval principle and instantly remember that I need to use flashcards. And a huge side benefit of this procedure booklet is it's not just for books. It's for any procedures. I put my morning routine, my evening routine, and night routine here. And you can put any types of procedures related to your business or personal life all in one place. Or, if you want to, another book. I'll suggest if you can't habitualize something immediately with the habit loop, you can always proceduralize it first into your morning routine, and then it slowly will become a habit automatically. To create this, it's very simple. You just need a tape, pencil, pen, a notebook, and some scrap paper. Just get any notebook, tear out the cover if you want to, or just paste a paper on top of the cover, and just imagine this is your own book. Write your table of contents with pencil for the contents, as contents can always change, and use pen for the numbers, as the numbers will be to refer which page is which page from flipping from this little papers over here. Now cut these papers and use the tape, and then voila! You now have a procedure booklet. Now put this somewhere where you can see every day so that you actually use it. For me, I just put it on my desk. Now, for experimental practical knowledge, I basically have a Notion template on this that I'll give you later. This is great if you use GTD or Notion, because then you can just use this immediately onto the next actions and try to experiment without any friction. But for the experiments that require weeks or days, for example, like how Cal Newport suggested a strategy on scheduling every single minute of the day, if I'm not wrong, that is something that could take a while. You will need to use a calendar to schedule something like that. And this is what the schedule thing is for. And the schedule view is where you can just see what experiment is being scheduled right now. If you sadly don't use GTD, you at least will be using some kind of to-do list. You just put the experiment on the top highest of the to-do list, also works with like a red color pen or something. When you're done with the experiment, you can choose to habitualize it or discard it, and it will be filtered away instantly. This is how it look like in action basically. First, I add a new experiment, I schedule it, I did it, and I found out it's useful. I want to habitualize it. I'll just click that, and it'll be gone.
So, what's next? I'm going to talk about the limits to this workflow. One of the limits is that it obviously doesn't work for every single book, and it definitely cannot be done for heavy practical books. For heavy practical books, I highly suggest you to just implement as you go. As you go each chapter, so you can truly learn by doing. That's what I did for GTD. And just literally just write down everything you see. Write down, you don't understand, just try to externalize your thoughts and just do it. And another thing to keep in mind is that this can be changed. You can personalize it to your own needs, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine. And some books, you can't not read the entire book, like, for example, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And another limit, again, is that you can't really experiment things like A/B testing yet. I'm still working on that, actually. And honestly, the biggest consequence of this strategy, I would say, is literally that it's not easy for people who don't like to take action. But for people who love to take action, woo! This will be your best friend. So actually take action, otherwise it's not gonna work. Just take action, like seriously. I know you heard this advice many times, but seriously, you must do something to change something, right? Thank you.